And once again, we're back with the life of Christ in chronological order. We're looking at John chapter 4, verses 43 through 54. We just finished up the Samaritan woman and what took place there and how that worked. We saw that Sunday afternoon. And today we're looking at the nobleman's son. Now, we notice that in John chapter 4, Jesus must needs go through Samaria. And we ask ourselves the question, well, why did he have to go through there? And the truth of the matter is, he went through there for the reason of dealing with that woman there at Samaria. Plus, he had to meet the nobleman in Canaan. Now, he went up through Samaria, stayed there 2 days, and then went on up to Nazareth, or toward Nazareth rather. And on the road he was going through Canaan, where where the water had been changed to wine, and there he met the man, the nobleman, lived in Capernaum. Now, we heard that the people of Sychar had listened to Jesus and they had believed in him. They had received him as their as the Messiah. They believed it. They accepted that. And Jesus stayed there with them for the 2 days. That'd be 48 hours, and then he went on his way. We see here this is the first time the expression is used that a prophet is without honor in his home country. This expression is used several different times. Once in Matthew chapter 13 verse 57 and Mark chapter 6 verse 4. Jesus was referring to Nazareth when he said that. He had gone into the city of Nazareth. They had not accepted him. Now, we don't know exactly when that was, but we do know that he had been there. He had gone there after the wedding, and after his baptism, after the wedding, and the people did not want to receive him at that time. So, as we continue the story now, Jesus had gone through Samaria. He had been down to Jerusalem for the Passover. We see that he tarried there in Judah for a little bit, and now he is moving up again toward the city of Capernaum. But he's on the way. He's on the road. Now, we don't know exactly when this is, but we do know that it was before John was put into prison. So this throws the entire thing in between the baptism of Jesus and the appearing of Jesus in Nazareth in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Now, we look at those and we see that there is expression in Matthew and Mark that John had already been cast into prison. John was in prison, and Jesus heard about that. Now, at this point, we see that John was not in prison. We saw that in chapter 3 and in chapter 4. The first several verses there. Now, we have a timetable here, and that timetable is given to us in the Passover and in the time afterwards. We see that Jesus said to the disciples, "Lift up your eyes and look on the field. They're white already to harvest." It's not 4 months till the harvest comes, which would then say, well, if the harvest were in September, then we would have August, we would have July and June, and possibly it would be in the month of May. which would be shortly after the Passover in April. It could also be that he tarried there for the Pentecost feast that was to come up 50 days after the Passover, and now he was going back. So we have a possible timetable here. He was baptized, and then shortly after that he went to the Passover. So when was he baptized? It could have been earlier in the months there. We don't know exactly, but we do know that Jesus was baptized. He was not baptized in the winter. Why would he be baptized in the winter? It was cold. And the winter months, and even in the area of Israel, even today, are cold. This is why we don't believe that the birth of Christ was in December. Okay, now, we see here that the declaration is made. After 2 days he departed from thence and went into Galilee. For Jesus himself testified that the prophet hath no honor in his own country. Now, Jesus has made this declaration. And this brings us back to the point, well, what was wrong with the people there? They looked on Jesus as that little boy, Joseph's son, the brother of James and Joas and Simon and Judah. We see that these people in the city of Nazareth did not look at him as some exceptional high prophet that he should have been looked at. There was no reverence there. Now, why didn't they have reverence for Jesus? Well, there's several different reasons. To be familiar with someone usually breeds contempt. And Jesus was not one to keep his mouth shut in a lot of cases. So we see that they saw him, they knew him, they saw how he was educated, and when he began to speak to them, and they saw that he had an education beyond what they knew, they said, where do you get this education? Where do you get this knowledge from? We know him. This is Joseph's son. This is the brother of James and Joseph and Simon and Judah. And we know they're his sisters. So where did he get this from? They did not like it. They were upset with what he had and what he was saying. In verse 45, chapter 4, verse 45, then when he was come into Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things that he did at Jerusalem at the feast. For they also went to the feast. So we see now that as Jesus comes back into Galilee, and by the way, Galilee is like a state that composes a very large area, and they saw him coming, they knew who he was, and so they began to look to him and say, well, no, wait a minute, what do we have here? Isn't this the man that did that down in Jerusalem? Yes, that's him. Let's follow him. They believed him. They received him, which they didn't do at Nazareth. When he came, they received him. They catered to him. He was a hero to them. Why? Because they were sick and tired of the problems that were taking place in Jerusalem, in the temple. They're being robbed by the priesthood, being robbed by the money exchangers, being robbed by the sellers of animals. They were seeing all that, and they were upset about it. Jesus had cast them out, and they were glad for that. They had seen what he did. They hadn't heard him. but they had seen, they were there. They took part in that feast, and they were witnesses to what Jesus had done. Verse 46, so Jesus came again into Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine, and there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. Now, we see the situation. Jesus is coming into the city of Capernaum, or city of Canaan. And here comes the nobleman. He's looking for Jesus. Let's go ahead and read the whole story and then come back and look at it piece by piece. When he heard that Jesus was come out of Judea into Galilee, he went unto him and besought him that he would come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. Then said Jesus unto him, except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe. The nobleman saith unto him, Sir, come down there, my child die. Jesus saith unto him, Go thy way, thy son liveth. And the man believed the word of Jesus, the word that Jesus had spoken unto him, and he went his way. And when he was going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, Thy son liveth. And then inquired he of them the hour that when he had begun to amend. And they said unto him, Yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. So the father knew that it was at that same hour in which Jesus had said unto him, Thy son liveth. And he himself believed, and his whole house. This is again the second miracle that Jesus did when he was come out of Judea into Galilee. Now, we see the story here. The father is upset. He's concerned. His son, his favorite son, his only son, more than likely, was sick. And that son had a very high fever. We don't know what disease he had, but we do know that Jesus was coming back. The man heard that Jesus was coming. He left his city. He went after Jesus. Now, why did he go after Jesus? He had not seen any miracle other than the casting out of the sellers there at the temple. So what made him think that Jesus could heal his son? We don't know. We don't know. We do know that the man left his home. He was desperate. He was completely obsessed by the fact that his son was dying, and he could not sit there and do nothing while his son was in agony. And so he left his home, got his horse, and started riding. On the way, he hears that Jesus has come out of Judah. Okay, now which direction is he coming? He's coming through Samaria. The man knew the road, and there are only 3 roads coming up out of Judah into Galilee. It's the coastal road, it's the Jordan road, or it's the Samaritan road. And when he heard that it was the Samaritan road, he went down that road looking for Jesus. Would he know Jesus? We don't know, but we do know this, that along that road he was looking for a large group of people that would be following a certain man. Now, it wasn't just a small little group walking along the road. He was not there at the time of the large movements. He had waited until all of the movements had taken place. When he come back into Galilee, here's this crowd just following him. Now, we see that the people of Galilee had received him. They welcomed him back into their area. Why? He had done a tremendous job down in Jerusalem. To them, he was a hero. Okay, as he came back now, we see that they had not seen the miracle of the wine being the water being made wine. They had not seen anything else other than what took place in Jerusalem. Notice what it says. Verse 45, going again. And then when he was come into Galilee, the Galileans received him, having seen all the things that he did at Jerusalem at the feast. For they also went unto the feast. So they were basing everything they were doing on what they had seen in Jerusalem. Their whole outlook of this was what happened at Jerusalem. So, we see that Jesus was coming back. The nobleman was looking for a hope, something to break the fever of his son. He was without hope. I mean, he was a very desperate person. He was going down the road looking for anything. Why didn't he go to the doctors? Well, the doctors in those days were few and far between, and their remedies didn't cure anything. What could they cure? They didn't cure anything. I mean, absolutely nothing. The only one that could cure would be God. And so we see that he was looking for a hope, a blessed hope here, that could cure his son. And so he rides down the road looking for Jesus. He had heard about what Jesus done. Maybe he had been there. We don't know. It's very possible he had gone down to Jerusalem. He had seen what Jesus did. And when he got back home, hey, he comes into the house and his son's sick, high fever. Well, what do I do? The doctor can't help him. So he gets on his horse and he rides down the road looking for Jesus. We know that later on, Lazarus was sick, remember? And Jesus tarried 4 days. He waited for that time. And he said to the disciples, let's go again into Judah because Lazarus is sleeping. Well, they didn't know what he meant. They thought that he was resting. Jesus finally tells them, no, he's dead. Well, let's go with, we may die with Jesus. They didn't understand. This man did not understand what was taking place either. All he knew is he had a hope that he could get to Jesus and get Jesus to come to his house. It's interesting. People think that the presence, the personal presence, is what does it. It's not the personal presence. Jesus was coming into Galilee. He had gone up to Canaan, and the man met him there at Canaan. Now, what was the man looking for? He was looking for somebody to cure his son. He was looking for a cure for the fever. We see that young boy. Now, let's ask yourself the question, how old is the boy? He is not an infant, because that's one word. He's not a little child, and that means adolescent. But he's a son. Huios. Huios is more than just a little baby or a little boy. He is up in mature, not totally mature, but he is possibly even a young teenage boy. Could be up to 12 years old. This man was frantic. That was his heir. That was the one who's going to inherit his business. That's the one who's going to inherit his position. The man was frantic. The man is seeing his son waste away, die away, because of a high fever. He's in torment. He himself is in torment because of seeing his son in that situation. Now, he finds Jesus. The boy is on the verge of dying, and Jesus looks at him and he says, "Please come down to my house and cure my son." Very interesting what Jesus said to him. Except you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Signs and wonders? What did that have to do with the man's request? Wait a minute. Let's go back. The man evidently had been down to Jerusalem. He had seen what Jesus did there. Now, is it possible that this man was there for an ulterior motive? Not just to see his son cured, but to see if this really was the Messiah. We don't know. We do know this. Jesus knew what was in all men. That's in chapter 2. He knew what was in man. He knew man's heart. He knew what was taking place with man. And this man was no different. He was not an exception. This man was just like any other man. Now, he went to find Jesus and compel him to go to his house to treat his son. Now, what do we know about that? Let's go back. We know the news travels fast. The man had heard that Jesus was coming into Galilee again. He goes after Jesus to get him to come to his house. Why did he have to come to his house? Well, like we were saying, Naaman, the Syrian captain with leprosy, thought, well, at least the prophet would come out and pass his hand over the infected place. But the prophet did come out. There was no coming out. There was no passing of hands. There was no speaking some hidden incantation. And by the way, when you see that word incantation, you see it in Numbers when Balaam went to curse Israel for Balak, that he used incantations. Now, we miss that because of what we think about incantations. We think of incantations as the occult services, the singing and the chanting that goes along with it. But what we don't realize is that it was with drugs. And he would go into a trance in that. A lot of people don't realize this. But the incantation and the drugs are one and the same. And so when a person is worshiping Satan or doing the black magic or anything like that, he realizes that all of that is taking place in a form of devil worship. And in order to get into the worship, they have to use drugs. So that refers then back to the book of Revelation, where they had their pharmakos, which is drugs, and their sorceries are drug related. We see that today. What's the favorite pastime of the world? Marijuana, cocaine, heroin, crack, and all these other weird drugs that rob a person of the mentality. The man went to Jesus. He expected Jesus to do something like all of the others would have done by using their incantations and such as that, like the witch doctors. A good friend of mine was a missionary for years to the Navajo reservation. And one day we were in a mission conference in Texas, and the missionary was telling some stories about some of the things that he had seen. And the pastor of that church said, "Come on, stop lying to us. You didn't see those things." And he affirmed that he had seen them. And so, as a result, he got kind of teed off at the pastor. Later on, I was in the state of Pennsylvania, and I went into a bookstore there, and they had some pictures, authentic, professional photos taken of various Indian tribes and ceremonies. And in this package of photos, there was a photo of one of the things that this missionary had talked about. And it was what they call the Kachina doll, or the Kachina ceremony for the Navajo and Hopi Indian. And in that ceremony, the witch doctor would go into a trance, and before him would be this big circle with a Kachina figured in sand painted there, and he'd take days to prepare that, and then he would go into this trance. On the 4 major points of the compass were bundles of 12 eagle feathers, and the minor points, single eagle feathers. And when he was in that trance state, those feathers would stand up, come up off the ground, and start twirling around and going around the circle. Well, that's when the pastor called the missionary a liar. Stop lying to us. Well, here was this picture of the Kachina ceremony, sand painting. It's there. You can see it. You can see the witch doctor in the background with his head cocked off to one side, his hands in his lap, and you can see that he was in trance. And the professional photographer had used a double light to illuminate everything that was there, a flash. And you could see these eagle feathers up off the ground about 4 to 5 inches, and you can tell that they were spinning, but you could see they were suspended in midair, and he took the flash and you could see the shadows of the flash. Oh, well, it can't be. I bought the pictures and sent it to the missionary and said, next time that preacher says anything, you show him the photos. People expect some sort of display in order to be healed. Except you see signs and wonders you will not believe. This man was flabbergasted. Why? Bro, please come to my house and heal my son. He's dying. Okay. Jesus just looked at the man and said, "Go thy way, thy son liveth." Your son is okay. Goes. You can see the pleading in the words of the nobleman. "Sir, come down here, my child die." He was concerned about his child. Yet, you stop and think about it. If Jesus had gone with him, he was on a horse, but Jesus was not. Now, the distance would be a little bit further on foot, slower on foot, because Jesus was not going to run beside the horse. But we see that the man would have taken longer to get there. Now, he believed the word of the Lord, and he got on his horse and started riding back. The next day, we don't know what time of day it was, but he was on the road going back to Capernaum. So it was already quite a ways that he had gone, when he met his servants who come running after him, or riding after him as fast as they could. Sir, 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 master, your son is alive, everything's fine. Well, when did he start getting better? Yesterday at the 7th hour. Okay, what time would that be? If we start at the Roman time, the 7th hour would be about 1 o'clock. If we were using the Jewish time, it would be at night time, about 1 o'clock. But that's not the time. It would be from the daylight hours, 6 o'clock in the morning, to noon is 6 hours, plus 1 hour to be 7. So it would be about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. They said about 1 o'clock. And he knew that it was at that same time that he had spoken to Jesus, and Jesus had told him, "Go, thy child liveth." So we see that as he went, he began to understand what Jesus was doing with him. Now, when we stop and we think about this, I can see this man kneeling there before Jesus Christ. And this is in my mind's eye, imagination, of course. I can see him there kneeling before Jesus Christ. And he's saying, "Oh, please come, please come." And Jesus says to him, "Go thy way, thy son liveth." Now, what had taken place? Jesus had told him, "Except you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. Please come, go thy way, thy son liveth." These are the only words that are recorded. We don't have a big long conversation. We don't have a big long communication here between Jesus and this nobleman. We see that the man was taken aback by what Jesus told him. As the words sunk into his heart, into his mind, "Thy son liveth, go thy way." With open mouth and awe, he stands up, mounts upon his horse, and rides away. Now, was he riding fast? No, I don't think he was. I think he was going slowly. What had just taken place. It was a long way off to Capernaum. We're talking about maybe 20, 30 miles from Nazareth over to Capernaum. 7 miles from Nazareth to Canaan. So let's say about 30 miles or so along the road. And he's going slowly. He's not going fast. He's walking his horse. He had been running the horse before. Now he's walking the horse. Before he had been upset, he had been distraught, he had been preoccupied about his son and about what was happening with his son. Now he's going and slowly pondering the conversation that he just had. "Except ye see signs and wonders, ye will not believe." Did he believe? He believed enough to get up off his feet, or get up, off his knees, get on his horse, and start riding back. He believed at least that much. Now he's going down the road. He's looking down the road, and he sees his servants coming. Says yesterday, so there's at least 18 to 20 hours that have passed Where did he sleep? We don't know. Could have stopped at Nazareth. Could have stopped along the way. But he was going down the road. He sees the servants coming, and they spot him immediately. They know their master, and they come up to him, and they say, "Your son liveth." If Jesus had followed him there, if he had to wait until he saw Jesus beside the boy, it's very likely the son would have died. We don't know. It's not a certainty, but there's this strong possibility. We know that there was an urgency in the request. We know that Jesus did not delay or deny the request. He didn't put it off to some other hour. He said, this is the way it's going to be. You're looking for something that you're not going to get. What didn't he get? Jesus going to his house. But he's a nobleman. Jesus going to his house was not permitted. The request had removed the impediment to the response. What was the impediment? I've got to see him do something. Lord, please, my son is dying. No, your son's living. Go your way. He's going to live. The long trip was not to be fast and furious to get to the boy. He had heard Jesus, and he was certain that Jesus was able to do what he said. Now, later on, we'll see again the factor here about this, that Jesus tells another man, centurion, your servant is well. The man had said to Jesus, I'm not worthy that you should come into my house. Who am I? That Jesus could come to my house and say a word to my servant when I'm a wretch. I'm a disgrace to God. But we see that that's exactly what happened. The man did not ride fast as he went back home. He took his time in going back home. Now, what do we know about that? As he was going, the servants met him, and it says he believed. He believed. Why did he believe? Well, Jesus said it. That should do it. Yes, it should do it. But except he sees signs and miracles, did the man really truly believe until he heard what the servants said? Was it necessary to have the servants there to tell him, your son is alive? Except you see signs and wonders and miracles, you will not believe. How true that is. And in reality, there are a lot of Christians today that believe the same thing. In fact, there in Kentucky and Tennessee, you have the snake handlers. If you have faith, then you can take up a snake, a rattlesnake, and it won't hurt you. Well, there's a lot of dead preachers out there because they took up serpents and they were bitten. Well, if you drink some deadly thing, it won't hurt you. And there's a lot of preachers out there and a lot of so-called Christians that have said, well, I can drink this and I'll show you my faith, and they drink it and die. There's some books out there written, and you know, I really don't know if we can truly believe all of the things that we read in these books by the Pentecostals and what they're saying. What do I mean? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that say this and say that there's no proof of what they're saying. Do we need proof? What do you think? Do you need proof that Jesus Christ will fulfill His word? Be careful for nothing, but in all things give thanks. We need to be thankful before we see what's happening. We need to know that God is still in charge. Can we take God at His word? The man needed the miracle of seeing the results in order to believe what was happening. But now, when he finally believed, it says something very interesting. And he himself believed, and his whole house. So when the father finally got there and saw his son, he believed. Did he believe the servants? Well, he believed a little bit. So the father knew that it was at that same hour in which Jesus had said unto him, Thy son liveth. And himself believed, and his whole house. Now, when did his whole house believe? When he got back there and told them the full story. How that he had encountered Jesus Christ and how Jesus Christ had done exactly that with him. So, we see here that the miracle was done at a distance, and the man really did not fully believe. Well, let's see the stage of belief here. He heard the word, he got on his horse and slowly rode off, contemplating about what he had heard. The next day he encounters his servants. Your son liveth. He rejoices. But really he doesn't believe until he gets to the house and he sees his son and realizes this is the result of Jesus Christ. This was not something done by mankind. Man's wisdom or man's actions. It wasn't a natural thing. It was a supernatural process. Jesus Christ had healed him. And I can imagine, as we look at this, that the man, when he got there, he questioned his son. When did you start feeling better? Well, the other day, about 1 o'clock, all of a sudden, the fever broke, and I woke up, and I was feeling great. Listen to the wife. The wife says, oh, at 1 o'clock, something just happened, and the fever broke, and here he is. Huh. Well, at the same time, Jesus spoke to me and told me, go thy son liveth. Now, the whole house believed because the Father believed, because the Father gave witness to Jesus Christ. How does this work? Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. We see Romans chapter 10 here, verse 17. Now, why is there a need to see miracles and signs and wonders? In Matthew chapter 12, verses 38 through 40, they said, show us a sign. Show us a sign. And we see that other places they said, show us a sign. In John chapter 10, show us a sign. There should no sign be given to you but the sign of the prophet Jonas. Remember chapter 2, John chapter 2. They said, show us a sign. What are you doing? Show us a sign. Show us your power, in other words. We want to believe, but we need to see your power. Do we really need to see the power of God in order to believe? Sad to say, I think that the majority of the Christians of today don't want to take God at His word and trust in what He's saying. Now, we need to stop and ask ourselves a question. Do I have to see signs and miracles and wonders in order to believe what Jesus is saying and doing? No sign shall be given this wicked and adulterous generation with the sign of Jonas. A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. What do we mean there? Why is it a wicked and adulterous generation? Because they do not want to take God at His word. Think about it. Do you believe what Jesus said? You know, there's a lot of people say, well, I believe you can lose your salvation. And then in your mind, Jesus is a liar. Because He said, I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish. Neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man can pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. We are not separate, we are one. Can we take God at His word? Jesus said, he that comes to me, I will in no wise cast out. Oh, but we can take ourselves out of that. How? Can you take yourself and remove your birth? You? No. So what do we mean here? We mean this, that as we look at Jesus Christ, we need to understand who He is. He is not just some figure. He is not just some historical name. He is a person. He is the God, man, and man God. Did He do the things that He said He did? If He didn't do them, then He's a liar. The Bible is a liar. And Christianity is a liar. And the disciples were liars because they affirmed that He did exactly what He said He was going to do. So what are we going to do? Are we going to accept the word of some critic, some person of today that has absolutely no idea as to what happened back then? We're going to take his word because he doubts this or doubts that. I remember when studying science, Louis Pasteur was trying to find cures, and he found the first vaccine for rabies. Everyone said he was out of his mind. He was a lunatic. But he found a cure or vaccine rather, for rabies. How about Lister? Lister went crazy because he saw what the doctors were doing. They were killing women because they didn't want to wash their hands. Unsterilized hands. And he saw it. He remarked to them, he told them, he said, look, these women are catching the infection from you, doctors. They ridiculed him, they mocked him. He died in an insane asylum. So what is the total course here? What are we looking at? What are we trying to say? People don't want to change. They want to put themselves up as something special. It's not that. That is not the way it goes. Jesus did not do that. He did not go around showing a bunch of miracles. And in fact, we've already said it, you don't have to prove you're a Christian. You don't have to prove it to anybody. If you are a Christian, it will come out. If you're not a Christian, it will come out. Now, how are we going to prove that we are or are not? Well, Jesus said this is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples. How? By proving your love. Not by miracles and signs and wonders. Hey, Satan can do signs and wonders. In fact, he's going to do signs and wonders. He's going to show forth mighty and powerful lying wonders. Take your Bible and turn with me to 2 Timothy, or 2 Thessalonians, excuse me. Notice what it says here in chapter 2 of 2 Thessalonians. Verse 8 and following. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders, and with all deceivableness of unrighteousness in them that perish, because they received not the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this cause God shall send them strong delusion, that they should believe a lie, that they might all be damned, who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Let's go back over to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24. And we see these words. Verse 24. For there shall arise false Christ and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they should deceive the very elect. Signs and wonders can be falsified. They can and are being used in the wrong way. This is not what we need today. We need to find the Word of God and get ourselves firmly into what Jesus Christ has told us and put it into practice in our lives. Being a Christian is not just going to church. Being a Christian is a 24-hour-a-day job. It begins early in the morning and ends when we die. When we get saved, we're born again. Behold, if we're born again, we are different. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you so very much for this lesson of this young man and his son. We ask, oh God, that you let this story reach into our hearts and stir us, that we may know and believe and understand what you've given to us. Bless us now in Jesus' precious name we ask it. Amen.